While waiting for Steve, I want to make a correction. I asked a question, but we had on the top of Pei Beis that you bring these doubtful bikurim, you bring them, but you don't recite the special declaration. So the Gemara said, why? Because you make a hecker. You make it known that these are different than regular bikurim, because if you don't show that these are different, because these are only brought because of a doubt, people are going to think that right, people are going to think that if you these doubtful bikurim, they're going to think that you don't need to bring any truma and meiser off of it. That's what they said, to bring them, but not to declare any declaration. So I think regular bikurim are not chayiv in truma and meiser. Regular 100% bikurim. These are brought because of a doubt. So people are going to see these doubtful bikurim, and they're going to think that they're really bikurim, that they're regular bikurim, and therefore they're going to not take truma and meiser off of these. I asked the question last time, but it was an incorrect question. So okay, where are we? We are in the middle of Pei Beis Amud Beis, talking about acquiring 3 trees. Yeah. Right? Amar le Abaye. We just finished off saying that even though Rabbi Kiva agrees by Ayin Yafa, by selling a pit, you sell the path. That's because there's no damage done to that path. But over here you would agree that even though you're selling the trees, you're not necessarily going to sell the area around it. Right? Yeah, I think we're Amar le Abaye le Rav Yosef. Right? Smack in the middle of Pei Beis Amud Beis. The last 2 words are Amar le. Amar le Abaye le Rav Yosef. Osan Oru v'Salo. So remember, you have a we learned last time that when you buy 3 trees in a field, you acquire the land under it, between them, and outside it. What does outside it mean? It's enough that you can stand there with a basket and pick your fruits off the tree. So that amount of land. So now we're asking, that land, mizoram. So who can go and plant in that area? Meaning, do you say that area belongs to the buyer? And if it belongs to the buyer, he can go plant there whatever he wants. Or do you say that it belongs really to the seller? He just gives the right to the buyer to be there and pick his fruits. But really, if the seller wanted to go plant something in that area, it really belongs to him. It doesn't belong to the buyer. He just lets the buyer be there. So Amar le Tinisua. So Rav Yosef responded to Abaye with a Mishnah later on in Tractate Bava Batra that says the following: Hachitzon Zarei Sederech. So a little background. Hachitzon Zarei Sederech. So you have, let's say, 2 gardens. One's an outside garden and one is a inside garden. So you have imagine 2 big gardens. One, you have to get to the outside garden, you get to this beautiful inside garden. So now in that area, there's a path to get from one garden to the other garden. So the halacha there is hachitzon zarei sederech, that officially the owner of the outside garden, even though the new owner of or not necessarily an owner, really any 2 people that own this kind of setup of an inner garden and outer garden, the inner garden owner can use this path to go through. However, the outside garden, the one who owns the outside garden, is allowed to plant. Yeah. So learn from there that whenever you have such a setup that you own property, but there's area around that you need. In our case, it's a tree. You need the area to pick the fruits. In that case, it's a pathway that goes from the inner garden to the outer garden. So the owner is officially, he's allowed to plant there what he wants. He's allowed to be Zoreya. However, he has to make sure that you can still walk from the inner garden to the outer garden. Yeah. So that's where Rabbi Yosef said back to Abaye. Okay. So Abaye says back to Rabbi Yosef, Amrle mi dami. They're not comparable. Why not? Hasam lesleip seida lelokea. There, what's the loss? There's no loss to the buyer, or meaning really to the owner of the inner garden. Aval hacha isleip seida. Here there is a loss. What's the loss? Isleip seida lelokea. Amrle kamitanfi peri. That you're going to be planting in this area where I want to stand and collect my fruits. So, if fruits fall on the ground over here, they're going to get all dirty. They're going to get icky. So I don't want you planting here. So you can't bring me the other case of two gardens. There, the guy's just walking from the inner garden through the path to the outer garden out to wherever he has to go. So there, he tells the guy, you can plant whatever you want. I don't care. As long as I can walk, I'm happy. So they're not really comparable cases. So he says back to him, Holo dami elo l'seifa. So really, if you want to compare this case, it's more comparable to the seifa. The seifa is that the guy got a path, not a straight path, a path somewhere on the side to get from the inner garden out to wherever he has to go. And in that case, they both agreed, they made a deal that basically Bezdin's going to give them, they compromise on a deal. They'll get a path. The owner of the outer garden will own the path. However, he'll agree that he's not allowed to plant there. And the owner of the inner garden, he's going to be allowed to walk through there. But both of them are not going to be able to plant anything. So that case over there is very similar. They both came to some kind of compromise through Bezdin, where they have a similar kind of setup. We have an inner field and an outer field. And he gave him a path somewhere along the sides. And the owner agreed that he's not going to plant there. And the inner field guy can't plant there because it doesn't belong to him. The outer field guy is not going to plant there because that was part of the deal that he made with the inner field guy. So that's very similar to us. Both of them made his deal over here. I'm selling you 3 trees. You're getting the land around it. However, that land that you need to collect your fruits with your basket, I'll agree to not plant anything there because it's going to potentially ruin your fruits. If they fall, they're going to get dirty. So if you're going to compare it to a case, compare it to that case. Holo dami elo l'seifa. V'zeh v'zeh einan r'shayin l'zora. So maybe you should compare it to that case. Tanya kivasa de Abaye, harei zakana tachtena b'nein v'chutz lehen, kimelo ora v'salo, v'zeh v'zeh einan r'shayin l'zora. A brisa supports Abaye that when you buy 3 trees, you acquire the land under, between, and around it. How much land? The amount that you can stand there with a basket picking your fruits in peace. And both of them, both the owner and the seller and the buyer are not allowed to plant in that area. The buyer because it's going to ruin the guy's, potentially going to ruin the guy's fruits, and the buyer because that doesn't belong to him. Okay. So that's about the outer land and how much air you have. So I guess we're working in reverse order over here. The kamiyehe beinehen, how much space is there between the trees? So you buy 3 trees, you buy the land under it. So what's the setup of these 3 trees? Are they right next to each other? So the Rashbam says if they're right next to each other, that's already like a yar ha'omid litlosh. That means like a forest ready to be plucked. If they're too close together, so that's not good. If they're very, very far apart from each other, so then you can't view it as a field of trees. So they need to be some distance where they're not right next to each other, and they're also not super far from each other. Imagine you have a 300-acre field. You have one tree on one side, one tree on the other side, 280 acres in the middle, whatever it is. You don't view those trees as one field of trees. You view it as 2 individual trees. And I guess that they're too close together, so then they're ready to be uprooted and removed. So how much is the space between them? that we are talking about? Okay, so we're going to have a machlokas. Rav Yosef Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yosef in the name of Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel. Me arba amos v'ad shmona amos. It can be from 4 amos. You need minimally 4 amos between each tree, between each one of these 3 trees, until 8 amos. If it's between 4 and 8, then you've acquired these 3 trees. So if you have a space of basically anywhere between 12 and right under 24 amos. So I think we're not including, it's 4 up to 8, but not including 8. So if anywhere you have 3 trees, and the distance between each tree is going to be somewhere between 4 and 8 amos, so then you've acquired that area. Rava Amar of Nachman Amar Shmuel. So it's both in the name of somebody in the name of Shmuel. Rav Yosef was the name of Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, and Rava was in the name of Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Mishmona va'ad sheish esrei. So he needs the field to be, each tree to be between 8 and 16 amos apart from each other. Now we're going to bring proofs from vineyards. Vineyards are going to have certain rules about planting vineyards. If you're going to, we know that something called kilayim. You know that there's shatnez by clothing. You know there's kilayim by vineyards. You can't really put other kinds of plants mixed together with a vineyard and create kilayim. So we're going to talk about different mishnayos about kilayim, or about vineyards really, as a paradigm for our case. So Amar le Abaye le Rav Yosef. Abaye says to Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef is the one who holds 4 to 8 amos. Amar le Abaye le Rav Yosef. Lo tiflak allowed to Rav Nachman. Don't disagree with the opinion of Rav Nachman. Meaning, Rav Yosef just went against Rav Nachman. He held 4 to 8. Rav Nachman held 8 to 16. So Abaye is saying, don't disagree with Rav Nachman. Why not? The Tanan Masnisin Kivase. We have a Mishnah later on. We have a Mishnah in Kilayim, that sides with Rav Nachman. So you should not disagree with Rav Nachman. Rather, you should agree with Rav Nachman. What's this Mishnah? The Tanan Hanoteya es Karmo Sheish Esrei Ama Al Sheish Esrei Ama. If you have a vineyard of 16 amos by 16 amos, Mutter Lahavi Zera Lasham. Then you're allowed to bring between each row. So you have a vineyard. You have a row of vines over here, and then you have a row over there. So as long as they're 16 amos apart from each other, so then you can go and put something in the middle. If they're less than 16 amos apart from each other, then that's going to be usher to go and plant there, because that might get involved in a problem of kilayim. Yeah. So he says, what do you see there? Okay. Rabbi Yehuda says the following. Maise b'Tzalmon, there was a story that happened in a city called Tzalmon. Be'echad shenates karma sheish esrei al sheish esrei am v'haya hofek se'ar shtei shuros letzad echad v'zorei es enir the shana acheres haya hofek es se'er l'makom zera v'zera sabor v'zera sabor. So uba maise v'necham v'tirua. The article gives a whole fancy map. But basically, without all the fancy pictures, but you can look there for more detail. You have a row of vines, then you have 16 amos. You have another row, and you do that 5 times over. So you have basically empty area between rows of vines. Now you want to save your land, so you don't go and plant in between the vines in every empty area. So you have area 1, area 2, area 3, area 4, area 5. So how are you going to plant? So you don't plant in all 5 areas. Rather, you switch off. So you plant in area 1, then you're going to plant in area 3, then you're going to plant in area 5. Now, when you do that, you take the vines and you turn them towards each other. Let's say in area 1, you turn the vines towards each other, and here you're going to be planting. The next area, though, is not touched, not plowed. The next year, you're going to flip it. The area that you left fallow the year before, now you're going to go and plant in that area. That's your agricultural process that you want to do. So, but what do you see? You see that you're allowed to go plant seeds in an area that is 16 amos. If it was less than 16 amos, so then it would be a problem. So this story came in front of the Chachamim, and they allowed it. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah. There's a discussion exactly where the 16 amos starts from, the trunk or the end of the vines. But okay. So meaning do you go from the end of the branches? That's where your 16 amos starts from, or it starts really from the trunks of the vines, from the roots of the vines. Okay.
How much of the plowed area did you actually plant in without being too close to the vines? You know, by the edge, if you're at the edge of the plowed area, it needs to be a certain distance from the vine.
Oh, correct. We're gonna see that. Yeah.
You can see that, okay.
Correct. But yeah, good. Well, it's interesting. That's why this guy really turned his vines inward. Because if not, so then when you want to go plant the fallow area number 2, then those vines are going to get in the way. So meaning each area is 16 amos apart from each other. But if you didn't turn your vines inward, so then the area that's next to it, you wouldn't be able to plow, because I guess the branches are going to be too close. Yeah, good point. But either way, we had a story that said that if it's 16 amos, so then, which is why you have to turn the vines inwards. That's why we allowed it. If you didn't do that, it would be less than 16 amos, and therefore it would be considered a vineyard, and you can't plant other things in a vineyard. Now that it's 16 amos apart from each other, that area is not considered a vineyard. The vines are too far from each other. Yeah, in Kilaim apparently talks about that when you have really, you have 5 vines that are arranged in a certain pattern, that's considered a vineyard. However, if they're 16 amos away from each other, then you don't view it as a vineyard. Once it's not halakhically a vineyard, then you are good to go. Okay, so this is Abaye. Once again, Abaye told Rav Yosef, don't argue on Rav Nachman. We have a Mishnah in Kilaim that's supporting this idea of 16 amos. So that's what Rav Nachman said. Rav Nachman said you have it from 8 until 16. 8 until 16 amos is still considered a field of trees. More than 16 amos, Rav Nachman said, you do not acquire the land under the trees because you don't view it as one unit. So Abaye was saying, look, in Kilaim you have the same thing. Once it's 16 amos and more apart from each other, so you don't view it as one unit. It's not one vineyard anymore. It's all a separate thing now. So he said, don't argue with him because the Mishnah supports him, and there's a story that proved it. So Rav Yosef says back to Abaye, Amrle Anole Adana. Okay, I don't know. Ella Uvda Have Bedura Derusa. Turning the page or top of the next page. He says, listen, I don't know about your not arguing with Rav Nachman. I have a story that happened. You have a story. I have a story. Yeah, mine happened in the Bedura Derusa, the city of shepherds, where one person sold somebody else 3 trees, and there were not 8 amos between them, and yet the guy was still obligated to give him the land, even though it was less than 8 amos. So he still had to go and give him the land. According to Rav Nachman, 8 amos, it has to be at least 8 amos apart from each other, the trees. So what was the story? But also coming to Rabbi Yehuda, they went in front of Rabbi Yehuda. So basically the story was there was 3 trees, and there were definitely not 8 amos between these 3 trees. Let's say there were, 5 amos between each tree. So hold on, if there's 5 amos between each tree, you're getting involved in Ara Machlokas. Rav Nachman said it has to be minimally 8 to 16 apart from each other. And Rav Yosef said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, said in the name of Shmuel, it has to be from 4 to 8 amos from each other. So Abaye just told Rav Yosef, listen, don't argue with Rav Nachman, but he said, hold on, I have a story over here that happened. It was less than 8 amos. We went to Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda told us that you have to give him land. How much land do you have to give him? The amount of land, Kimale Bakar V'Kela, the amount of land that you can take your cattle and vessels through there. Like, meaning if you need a plow, you can go, and it has to be the amount of area that can fit the animals and their vessels to go plow.
So that's for the pathway.
That's for the area between the trees. Yeah, meaning the area between the trees has to be enough of an area that an animal and its vessels can go through and plow. So the Gemara just continues, V'lo haviyadana, kimali bakra kelev kama. How much is this area where an animal can go through with its vessels to plow? I need a measurement. 3, 4, 5, 6, what is it? So Kavan Deshamis Laha. Once I heard the following Mishnah, I was put at ease. Kavan Deshamis say that Tanan, the Mishnah says, Lo Yita Adam Ilan. You're not allowed to plant a tree. Samuch l'sadei chavero. You cannot plant a tree next to your friend's field. Ella imkein hirchik menu arba amos. You're not allowed to plant a tree closer than 4 amos to your friend's field. You have to distance your tree at least 4 amos from your friend's field because if you're going to now plow, if you're going to do work around your field, you might encroach on his property. So we said, stay away 4 amos. That way you ensure you're not going to damage someone else's property. Vitani Allah, these 4 amos, Shamru, Kidei Avodas Akarim. We said 4 amos because it's in case you have to work your vineyard, you have 4 amos to do work and you won't damage your friend's field. So Shmamina, Kimale Bakar V'Kelev, Arba Amos. So that's where I learned that this area of Kimale Bakar V'Kelev, the amount of area that can fit an animal through with its vessels to plow is Arba Amos. Yeah. So you told me you have Rav Nachman. I'm telling you, I had a story where as long as the area between the trees are 4 amos, then Rav Yehuda gave us the land under the trees. That was considered enough to separate the trees from each other. That is considered still a field of trees. Yeah. Okay. So fine. So now we're asking. Hold on. You just told us. Abai told Rav Yosef, don't argue with Rav Nachman. We had a story. So the Gemara asks, Ukur Rav Yosef Milo Tanan. It's not like Rav Yosef was arguing on a Mishnah. He had other Tanaic opinions that held like him also. So why was Abai so set on Rav Yosef, don't argue with Rav Nachman? Rav Yosef is going to have his own backing from earlier sources also. Let's see. Milo Tanan, that Mishnah that you brought earlier from Kilaim, Perek Dalad Mishnah Tes, keep reading that Mishnah. Milo Tanan, Rav Meir, Rav Shimon, Omrim, Hanoteyes, Karmos, Shmona Amos, Al Shmona Amos. If you're going to go plant a vineyard 8 amos by 8 amos, so then Mutter Lahavi Zera Lasham. There's a more lenient opinion, not 16 amos. Even 8 amos apart from each other, when it comes to vineyards, is enough to not consider it a vineyard anymore. If the vines are 8 amos apart from each other, it's no longer a vineyard. And you're allowed to bring other seeds to plant there, and you won't get into trouble with kilayim. So that opinion holds that as long as you're 8 amos apart from each other, you're not considered a vineyard. So our Rav Yosef, who says when you have trees that are apart from each other, he says as long as they're 4 to 8 amos apart from each other, that's fine. Once you're 8 amos apart from each other, now you consider that they're too far apart. That is going like Reb Shimon. So Rav Nachman said in Kilayim, if you're within 16 amos, you're still considered a vineyard. If you're more than 16 amos, you're not considered a vineyard. That was very good when you're buying trees. If the trees are within 16 amos from each other, they're still considered 1 unit. If they're more than 16 amos, it's not considered 1 unit. So says the Gemara, Rav Yosef has the same thing. Rav Yosef goes like Rav Shimon, that if it's within 8 amos from each other, it's considered a vineyard. You can't plant there. If it's more than 8 amos from each other, it's no longer considered a vineyard, and you could plant there. So why was Abai? Abai knew the Mishnah. He brought the beginning of the Mishnah. He didn't miss the end of the Mishnah. So why did Abai say, don't argue on Rav Nachman? Why not? Rav Yosef has an opinion to go like. He goes like Rav Meir and like Rav Shimon. So you'll have a machlokas, Rav Yosef and Rava, which is really an earlier machlokas, Rav Nachman and Rav Meir and Rav Shimon. That's fine. Says the Gemara, afilu hachi ma'isa adif. You're right. Abaye wanted Rav Yosef not to argue on Rav Nachman because the Mishnah itself brought a proof. Ma'isa b'tzalmon, where they did this whole planting thing, where they put the vineyards facing each other. the Mishnah itself brought a story to prove Rav Nachman's point. So when you're bringing a story in the Mishnah, that's a stronger proof. So that's why Abaye said you shouldn't disagree with Rav Nachman. Not because we didn't find any opinion that agrees with you. It's just that the Mishnah itself brought a story. The story that you brought came at a later point. Rav Yehuda was a later story. But the story in the Mishnah was a stronger point. It was a stronger proof. So that's why Abaye said what he said. Yeah. Meaning whenever you have a Mishnah with two opinions and the Mishnah itself brings a story to prove one of the opinions, that's much stronger. Okay. So says the Gemara, Bishlam Alira of Yosef, member of Yosef, is the one that says that as long as the trees are 4 to 8 amos apart from each other, then that's enough to be considered that if you have the 3 trees have to be minimally 4, maximum 8 amos apart from each other to be considered a field of trees. Okay. Bishlam Alira of Yosef, Aliba der Rav Shimon, we just said he goes like Rav Shimon, Shma'in le mifuzarin. We brought down already a case where we're going to use the words now, mifuzarin and ritzufin. Mifuzarin literally means to be spread out. In this case, it means that the maximum amount we need, that they're still considered a field of trees. And ritzufin literally means one after another. That's the minimal amount that we need. So remember, Rav Yosef said 4 to 8. So, Aliba de Rav Shimon, we heard mifuzarin. Rav Shimon said 8 amos is, if it's more than 8 amos, it's no longer considered a vineyard. So we understand where Rav Yosef is coming from when he gave his maximum size, the maximum shear, that was 8. But Ritzufin, sorry, I'll leave it to Rav Shimon Shma'in le mifuzarin, Vishma'in le Ritzufin. We also know Rav Yosef about his minimal shear. Let's see in a second. So mifuzarin ahad amran. We just told you the maximum shear. That was Rav Shimon by a vineyard. 8 amos apart from each other. More than that is considered is considered no longer a vineyard. Less than 8 amos is considered a unit. But where have we heard this idea that 4 amos is the minimal shear? Ritzufin. So now we're going to bring you a Mishnah that's going to show us that 4 amos is the minimal shear. That if it's let's see, the Tanan Kerem Hanatua. So you have a vineyard that's planted al pachos me'arba amos, eino kerem, divrei Reb Shimon. A vineyard that's planted less than arba amos, meaning the it's not considered a vineyard. Rather, it's considered like a forest, meaning it's not considered a vineyard. Maybe the footnote explains exactly why that's true, but it's same as earlier. When things are planted too close together, we don't view them halachically as a vineyard. We view them more like a forest, ela ya'ar, and therefore it's actually mutter bikilayim. You're allowed to plant there. You only can't plant in a vineyard. However, if these vines are less than 4 amos from each other, so then that's not considered halachically a vineyard. So that's the opinion of Reb Shimon. V'chachamim omrim, they argue, no, it is considered a vineyard. V'roen esa'em tzayim ki'ilu einon. It's considered a vineyard, and we view this middle space like it doesn't really exist. It's not really there. And so the fact that there's 4 amos in the middle doesn't bother the chachamim. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what do you see? You see that according to Reb Shimon, the minimal amount to be considered a vineyard is 4 amos. The vines have to be that, meaning they have to be 4 amos, I guess. I don't know how it describes it over there, but 4 amos apart from each other to be considered a vineyard. If they're all clumped together, less than 4 amos, so that's not going to be considered a vineyard. Right? Yeah, Steve, is that what it says? Yeah? Is that what it says?
No, but that's what you said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not a vineyard.
Not a vineyard. Okay.
Less than 4, yeah.
Less than 4.
So it's not a vineyard, does that mean?
Yeah.
Plant right up to the right?
That's what it sounds like.
But then you'd have a problem with Kollel.
Right. So it sounds like Kilayim is only by a halachic vineyard. It's not a halachic vineyard. You know, I'm gonna get back to you. I'm looking up today.
Okay, because that's Rabbi
know
Shimon.
Right. We're trying to find what's the explanation of it. Meaning, Jules asking, you have these vines there anyways, so it seems like it'd be a halachic vineyard to be here. It says it earlier on its Zion and Beis. Yeah. Yeah, meaning you have to have 5 rows of vines to be considered a vineyard, and when it's a vineyard, therefore it's going to be prohibited. The Rashi told us, 50 daf ago. He says here, yeah, Jules, I'm gonna look it up.
Okay.
Let's keep going for now, and then I'm gonna. Yeah. Okay. But what do you see? You see that according to that 4 is the minimal requirement. So now you know Rabbi Yosef, who holds by trees, that you need minimally 4 and maximum 8 to be considered a field of trees. We now found Reb Shimon saying a maximum amount, and we found Reb Shimon with a minimal amount. So that's very good. Yeah. Elo Rav Nachman, who held minimally 8, maximum 16. Aliba de Rabbanon mifuzar and shmeinan lei. You brought that story for us that according to the Rabbanon, 16 amos is the maximum amount. That's good. But Ritzufin mishmeinan lei, where did we find, according to Rav Nachman, that 8 amos is the minimal amount? That if it's more than 8 amos, it's no longer considered a vineyard. So therefore, we applied that to our case, that has to be at least 8 amos, or they're not considered, their own entity, field of trees. So we say svarahu. We never found Rav Nachman telling us the minimal amount, but it's a svara. What's a svara? Midl Rav Shimon palga l'Rabbanan nami palga. The same way Rav Shimon's ratio is 8 is the maximum, 4 is the minimum. Rav Nachman has a maximum of 16. More than 16, it's considered its own. It's too spread apart. So it makes sense that Rav Nachman's minimal shear is going to be half of that. The same way Rav Shimon's minimal shear comes out to be half of his maximum shear. So Rav Nachman, we never found a Mishnah explicitly stating that Rav Nachman holds that 8 amos is the minimal requirement, and less that is considered like too close together. However, it's logical, a logical deduction. Okay. Yeah, deep breath and continue. Rava says the halacha is if you have trees from 4 amos until 16 amos. Right, so this is interesting. Before we had 2 opinions, 4 to 8 and 8 to 16. Says Rava, the halacha is 4 to 16. Is he explained here? 1 second. Yeah. Basically, the Rashbam says that Rav is taking both of these stories. The story with these interesting way to how to plant the vineyards where they're facing each other. There, the maximum was 16 amos. Our story on the first line of this amud over here in the city of shepherds, Bedura Derusa, there he gave him minimally 4 amos of land. So Rava took, best of both stories. That the minimal is 4 and the maximum is 16. Yeah. Okay. So Amar Rava Hilchasa me'arba amos ha'jeshay amos. Tanya Kivasi de Rava. We have a brisa supporting this opinion of Rava. Kama yumikuravin arba amos kama yumiruchakin sheshasrei harezeh kanakarka ve'es hayilano shebeinehem. Explicit brisa saying that if you have trees that are between 4 and 16 amos apart from each other, you've acquired them. You've acquired the land under them, the land between them. The fikach, therefore, Yavesha Ilan o Niktats, if the tree gets dried out or it gets cut down, Yesh lo karka, you own the land under it, so go and replant. Hachos bikano Yeser alkan, if the trees are more than 16 amos apart from each other, or less than 4 amos apart from each other, or Osha lachan bazeh, or you buy them one today, one tomorrow, one this hour, one next hour, meaning we don't see you buying a field of trees. We see you buying 3 individual trees. Then you have not acquired. If either you bought more than 16 or less than 4, or you bought the tree one after another, you've not acquired loas karka. The loas ha'ilano shivin, you haven't bought any of the little trees that are between these trees, meaning you haven't bought the land under the trees, in between the trees. Therefore, if your tree dies out or gets cut down, since you do not own the land under the trees, you are not able to go and just replant with that, because the land doesn't belong to you. Only the trees belong to you, not the land. Okay, so that concludes our discussion of how much land around the trees, we said, is the amount you need to hold the bucket and pick. How much land between the trees? It has to be between, at the end of the day, between 4 and 16 amos. If it's less than that, it's too close together. It looks like they're going to be like a forest. It's going to be uprooted. And if it's more than that, they're too spread out. Bayi Rabbi Yirmiyah. Okay, this is interesting. Bayi Rabbi Yirmiyah. Oh, we have some time. The walk is shorter today to show. I like this much better. Keep my stuff in one place. Yeah. You have tables to put your tefillin on. It's great. So, Bayi Rabbi Yirmiyah, Kishahu Moded, when you're measuring the distance from each other of the trees. Yeah, when you're measuring 4 amos. Yeah, Kishu Moded. Please. Bayi Rabbi Yirmiyah. No, sorry. Yeah, Bayi Rabbi Yirmiyah. Kishu Moded. Where do you measure from? Mimakom katzar hu moded, or mimakom rachav hu moded. When you're counting the 4 amos, do you count from the, literally it means the thinner area, or do you count from the thicker area? So these 4 to 16 amos. So what's the thicker area? What's the thinner area? I assume the thicker area is the root. Is that correct? Lower down. And the thinner area are really the branches going out, no?
Right.
Okay. Amar le Rav. So Amar Rav Gviya mi Beik Sil le Rav Ashi. Tashma. We have a Mishnah in Kilayim. Titnan. Harakuva shibo gefen eino moded elo meikar hasheni. So you have this young vine. So this young vine that was grafted with an older vine. So kishu moded arba amos. When you want to calculate the arba amos, so where do you calculate from? From the ikar hasheni. Now, how does it translate the ikar hasheni? It's like the second part of the vine.
This second trunk.
Meaning it's in the middle. The thickest part is the trunk. The thinnest part of the branches. Here, when you measure somewhere in the middle. You measure from a middle part. So too by our trees, you don't measure from the thickest part, which is the trunk, and you don't measure from the thinnest part, which are the branches. You measure from the middle part. Now, I don't know, practically on a regular tree, where is this middle part? The trunk, I understand, is the thickest. The branch, I understand, is the thinnest.
Yeah, but your trunk
A little
narrows.
higher up.
Got it. The trunk is wider on the bottom. The actual tree comes out as thinner, and the branches are the thinnest. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
So you find the part that's in the middle, and from there you measure. Okay.
You should really in that call Department of Forestry.
When in doubt, call Steve. I think that's what he said, right?
No, Department of Forestry, they will really help you with the trees. And make sure you don't.
But they have to know Bava Batra too.
Believe me, Bava Batra is easy compared to them.
Yeah. Okay. You heard it here first. Bayi Rabbi Yirmiyah, Machar lo shlosha badei ilan. Okay, so now you sold 3 badei ilan. So you have this one tree. However, the tree has shalosh badim, 3. How does it translate? Buds.
Bowls.
Yeah, what's a bowl? Meaning it's 3 trunks. It's not 3 trunks, but it's basically the bottom of the tree has 3 areas to it, and are each 4 amos apart from each other. So it's really one tree, but it bulges out in three places. So therefore, it looks like three trees. So Rashbam explains, what's the question? So the Rashbam says, Miya's linam basar gufa ilan. So do you go after the actual tree, which is one tree, and then you do not acquire the land under it? Or since you look at the roots of the tree, each one has like its own area in the ground. So then, for all intents and purposes, the area in the ground, it's like three big lumps that this tree is coming from. So maybe you acquire, maybe you view it as three trees and acquire all the land under the tree. Yeah. So Amrle Rav Gvia Mibei Ksil, this Rav Gvia from the place called Ksil, Rav Ashi, he said to Rav Ashi the following, Tashma, another mission over there in Kilayim, Hamavrich Shlosha Gefanim ve'akarehen nirin. If you go and you have grafted three branches, and now when you grafted three branches, it looks like six branches. Right? You took three branches and you put them together, each one with each other. It became like six branches. And when it comes to six, that's already called a vineyard. Now, and what happened is v'karehen nirin, meaning you could see the roots, meaning these vines have rooted in the ground. You can see the roots. What's the halacha? The halacha is Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Tzadok Omer, im yesh beineim arba amos v'at shmona mitztarfin. If, even though these are really only three vines that are now grafted, but since you see their roots, so as long as they're 4 to 8 amos apart from each other, then they can combine. But if they're not, then they cannot combine. So even though every two, right, you have two vines, you have one vine, you grafted it, right, with itself. So it comes out, you have three vines, and you took very long vines and you put them together. So you have the two vines that you grafted are all coming from one source. They're one root. So you have three vines with three roots, and now you combine them, you grafted them together. So now you have 6 vines, but every 2 vines are getting their sustenance from only one root. Each 2 vines share a root. And yet, what happened? What happened was that it's considered a vineyard. So too by our case, when you have these trees that are 3 big roots, so that would be considered also like 3 trees. And therefore, you've acquired the land under it. Yeah. Last part, Bayra Papa, Macharlo, Shnaim Betok Sadeo, Be'echad Ala Meitzar, Mahu, Shnaim Betok Shalo, Be'echad Betok Shalchaveru, my take. You have 2 cases. You sold these 3 trees, but 2 of them in the field, 1 of them on the border, or 2 of them is in your area, but 1 tree you own somewhere else. In your friend's area, my take, meaning, let's say they fit all the requisite measurements. However, they don't look like a field of trees. 2 here, and even though 1 is within the measurement, but it's on the border, or 2 in your property and 1 right next door in someone else's property, that might not look like a field of trees. On the other hand, they fit the measurements. So how do you do that? Says the Gemara, you got to wait for Eliyahu Navi. They say